Hello and welcome everyone to ND Like Me. Today I will record a little mini episode to explain what the heck I'm doing here and why. I want to give you a rough idea of how I ended up here, and that way hopefully you can appreciate my angle and the big introduction of myself and my backstory, that will come in another episode. So I will get someone else to interview me as a one-off, so you can get the whole big story and the big rundown of everything you might want to know. But for today, I just want to explain that what podcasts have done for me in the past. So about 2 or 3 years ago, I started looking at my own neurodiversity more in depth and with a lot more interest than I previously have. Before that, I have put my mind to neurodiversity, but more in the context of learning about my children. And a lot of curiosity and fascination and interest I had from the very start. But the last few years have been intense in the sense that I had this epiphany when my youngest boy got diagnosed with autism, or around the time we were looking at getting him a diagnosis, that I came across something that made it clear to me that autism in women, especially late diagnosed women, can present very differently. And from that moment onwards, I tried to consume everything I could on the topic. And a lot of things felt not whole enough, not wholesome, not all-encompassing enough to capture what my experience has been like. But that changed when I started listening to podcasts on the subject. Now, there's a few different podcasts that I would like to give a shout out to that have really helped me and supported me and changed my life in a lot of ways. These are my absolute favorites. I've listened to other podcasts too, and there is quite a lot of podcasts on the subject by now. And it seems like every time I hop on Spotify, there's a new one as well. And I do check out a lot of them. I do have to say though that my favorites have one thing in common. They are by people where, firstly, I like to hear them talk. Secondly, they talk in a way that make me feel like I'm sitting right across the table, like we're on the same wavelength, on the same height, so to speak, and on the same level is what I'm wanting to say with that. And they're casual conversations, although they do have facts and interesting topics in them, sometimes quite serious topics, and yet they always bring a lightheartedness, and it makes me feel like I am in a conversation with friends or listening in to a conversation of friends, which is so nice and so validating and so good when you felt quite isolated and lonely for big chunks of your life. So with that in mind, the podcasts I've been a huge fan of, big shout out to these guys, have been ADHD Besties, which unfortunately has discontinued, but two women, Grace and Tara, have recorded quite a good amount of podcast episodes, and they've made them really fun. They're really fun to listen to, and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. They actually have been local in my area for the time of them recording the podcast, so I have felt quite connected to them, although I've never actually had much to do with them. The other one that to this day I love, and I would love to talk to these guys at some point, and that is WTF is ADHD with Ellie and Paige. They're late diagnosed sisters. They're in New Zealand, and every time a new podcast episode comes out, I'm just about jumping up and down with excitement, because I just love listening. It soothes my soul, because I feel like, they're speaking my mind on so many topics. And they've actually really listening, I want to say they've really encouraged me, but it's like I know them, but obviously listening to the podcast has really encouraged me to in the end seek a diagnosis when for a long time I was unsure about it. And there's also a podcast I discovered recently, which is Autistic Women Oversharing. These guys are hilarious. They're all comedians based in the UK. They write an online magazine called The Daily Tism. I highly recommend it if you're into satire. And they share so vulnerably, and they've mastered the art of taking the piss out of themselves on a regular basis, non-stop pretty much, if I dare say. And their character comes through in these episodes, and again, although I don't personally know them, I feel like I do, and I just want to give them all a big cuddle and tell them how much I love them, because they've made me feel so heard and seen and understood, and they have given me so much joy because they've made me laugh so much throughout listening to their podcast. And a very different podcast that I'm also really into is Mark Manson's Solved. Now that isn't actually neurodiversity related, but it is about psychology and philosophy, which are both areas of interest for me, and I can really nerd out with these guys. They make a really great podcast, and the way that they structure it, they deliver it with humor and also sharing personally from their own lives, and they have great banter as well. So if you're interested, these are my recs. And I do, if any of them ever listens to this, I love you guys. You've literally made my life a better place, a better space. You've made it better. So what's happened is, throughout this time of self-discovery, the last few years, I often have to potter around the house and get stupid, boring housework done, because I live in a household of 5 people, 3 of them minors. Gesundheit, that's my partner out there having a big sneeze. And there's always something to do, and I don't always want to do the things that need doing. So putting on a podcast has not just seen me through hours and hours of housework, but also has given my brain something to do, being intellectually stimulated and not falling into negative thought spirals, which is something my brain sometimes tends to do if I'm not careful. So giving it something to engage in and think about that is of interest, and that has actually helped me with my personal journey and self-development and acceptance and validation, has been a lifesaver. And through this experience that I've had with other people's podcasts, I've come to the conclusion that I would really like to create my own podcast. I do have things to say. I am not an expert as such. I do have lots of lived experience of being a late diagnosed ADHD woman. I am a qualified early childhood educator, and I have 2 to 3 neurodivergent kids in my immediate family. And I am also a qualified disability support person. And I'm losing my words. That's not the right wording for it, but you know what I mean. So I guess I've got all of that behind me that I can speak of, and I have seen a range of people. So, you know, in my family, we're more on the high masking side because I don't want to use high functioning. That's very deceiving. High masking and very hard sometimes to explain to people that we are in fact all neurodivergent, or most of us. Whereas I've also worked with some severely disabled people where other people can kind of tell at first glance that something's not quite to the ordinary standard of things. And where am I going with this? I don't really know. Only that back to the topic of podcasts inspiring me. I guess I feel like I have things to say, and I feel like I'm still so curious and I want to learn so much more that I want to use this podcast as a tool for both sharing what I know, what I've figured out myself up to this point, and taking you guys along on the journey of talking to more people and learning even more. Now, I hope you will accompany me on this journey, and I hope you like listening to me, because I definitely pick podcasts where I like to listen to the host. If I find them irritating in any way, I won't listen. My accent is that I am originally from Germany, but I have lived in Australia for, about 20 years. So I have a weird little accent that I hope you can tolerate. And I do sometimes get things mixed up, words mixed up, which I don't think is purely because of being bilingual. I think it's just my brain as well, and sometimes becoming self-conscious in the most terrible moments. I don't want to cut too much of that out because I want you guys to see me for who I am, and hopefully let that give you guys permission to be who you are whilst feeling validated and less self-conscious as well. So it's a bit of a healing journey for all of us. One more thing I would like to add. For a long time, I didn't feel like I wanted to start another podcast on neurodiversity, because the ones that are already out there that I love so much, I didn't want to end up being competition for them, which I know is kind of silly, but and I guess also self-confidence. But I've gotten to a point now where I think I can bring my own flavor of things to the conversation, and I guess you can take it or leave it. Hopefully it will resonate with some of you, and I hope that I can be friends with all the other podcasters that I really love and appreciate, or at least not enemies, because that's just silly. And I'm also planning on starting a community. I will work out the details and let you know about that soon. But if you're interested in what I'm planning and brewing up, please like and subscribe so you don't miss it. And finally, I want to thank you for sitting through my monologue rambling on all of that. I hope it was at least somewhat interesting, and I really hope I see you next time for my first interview. Thank you all, and remember, you're not broken, you're just indie like me. See you soon.